Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Inchstones podcast. I'm so pleased to have a dear old friend of mine who has gone through her own life transformation and chapters, and the connectivity that I found with her in our most recent life phase has been nothing but impactful to me, to say the least. So I have Meredith Hudson here, who has been in digital media sales for decades at this point, right? And has evolved
Yep,
her
total.
own journey of her career path and her personal life path in so many ways, and has leaned into evolving, which I believe is why you and I have reconnected in this middle life of ours, is that we've constantly chosen to evolve. So, Meredith, hi.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, this is
I'm
awesome.
so excited to chat today.
Tell everyone, do your little your quick bio and why you feel right now where your 2 feet are, how you've landed here, and the overarching thing of choosing the hard thing to do.
Yeah, I feel like I've chosen the hard thing, and I've also been, in that circumstance where the hard thing has chosen me too. And I think that has really kind of paved my way. But yeah, I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts. I lived most of my life there until college, and I moved to New York. I've worked for the past 20 years in digital media sales.
If you don't mind speaking to your journey of cancer in your 20s and how it actually was a critical pivot point for you.
Yeah, so I would say that was one of the most impactful things that happened in my life in my 20s. So, kind of to give you a little preview before I was diagnosed with cancer, I was a really strong student athlete. I went to a great private school. I went to a great college. I played Division 1. I was very driven. I was very lucky. I had two parents who were incredibly supportive of whatever my dreams were. And I was always, I think back then I didn't even really realize I was choosing hard, but I was
Mm-hmm.
consistently putting myself in the path of what I thought would be the most challenging,
Mm-hmm.
the most physically demanding. I just loved it, and I was a high performer. I then graduate college. I moved to New York City, woke up with a lump on my neck one day, and the hard chose me in that circumstance. I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. I was only 22 and I went through, 6 months to a year of treatment and just getting better. I just moved to New York City. I was going out with my friends all the time. I had a job. I was finally making money. Like life was good. And this thing happened to me. And I, I don't mean to say it didn't rock my world. It completely rocked my world. But I also was still naive enough to just think it was like a little bump in the road and I was going to get over it. I was, again, very lucky, incredibly supportive family. What it did, though, was really shift my perspective on life. And while there are so many different types of cancer, going through any type of cancer is traumatic and is really hard. I tried really to just fill my days with things that were going to be to make me happy and to make me
Mm-hmm.
fulfilled and have a different appreciation for every single day that I got. Now I have two kids, and because it happened so early on, it was almost like a gift that I was given in a way. And I know it sounds so crazy to say that could be a gift, but it truly was, because I now think these are the things I get to do
Yes.
because I went through that hard thing, came out on the other side. Life looks a little different when you go through something like that. I think there's something drastically different between how the information that we're exposed to now, the things that we know about development and about kids,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that we can even witness our kids and watch it, right?
Yeah.
Like my mom wasn't watching everything that I was doing because she was working, I was in school. Like Ellie got in someone else's car for the first time to drive from her high school soccer field to a friend's house for a pasta party. And I stood with my phone in my hand and watched her Life 360 drive in someone else's car, right? Like, so we are experiencing what our kids are
Yes.
going through in a very different way
Mm-hmm.
than past generations.
I think there was less emotional choice between parents and their kids decades ago. It was more this physical, I provide for you, I provide food, shelter, and experiences. But when it comes to the mental and moral, you just have to witness it and you have to choose for yourself. And I think now we have these conversations and this ability to learn about our children and their development and be an active participant in their moral mental development too. The choice of how we mother in this generation, I think I'm glad to mother in this generation. I have the ability to watch and hover and hawk a little bit, but there's also a lot that we're able to do that are so different.
I mean, I think there has never not been, I think, by good moms, this desire to hover and to watch and to wonder, am I giving them the best? Am I doing the right thing? Right? That
Mm-hmm.
is, the tale as old as time is moms wondering if they're doing it all right. I
Right.
think what we have the benefit of now are podcasts like this, voices like this,
Yeah.
exposure to more people who are doing things in different ways, and also very smart people who have
Right.
been doing it much longer than we've been doing it. And every
Mm-hmm.
time I take my dog for a walk, I can put in a different parenting podcast,
Yes.
right? Or
Yes.
hear from different people. Our moms didn't have this. Their
I
moms didn't
know.
have that, right? They were more stories passed down from mother to mother or
Mm-hmm.
friend to friend. And our world is just
Or it was more
huge.
cultural. It was more cultural, like
Exactly. Yes.
generational culture was such a thing of, probably only 2 to 3 generations removed from us. My grandmother, a story that is told about her, even Morgan would know this. My grandmother boycotted Mattel in the 60s or whenever Barbie came out. She was horrified with Barbie. Horrified. Wrote a letter to Mattel saying she will never buy Barbie for her daughters. This is in the 90s. And
Yeah.
she got a letter back from Mattel, and it became this part of my grandmother's motherhood. I mean, it was almost like the stamp of who she was, right? Was this
Yeah.
boycott of Mattel. Those parts of her, I know she was more complex than that, but that became her motherhood, was like being this Irish stoic. We're not going to
Yeah.
buy Mattel.
No, you don't need a pink Barbie.
But for us, we get to intake so much more, and I think choose a little bit more of who we really want to be.
Yeah. It's also harder in a sense too. Like I have decision paralysis all the time. I overthink things all the time because I have been exposed to little nuggets
Hmm.
here and there across the internet or across the podcast, right?
Hmm.
One of the things that I just keep going back to, and I definitely get this from my mom, who was raised 2 daughters with no parenting books, no parenting podcasts,
Hmm.
nothing like that,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
she just, you figure it out as you go. I get that from her, that like
Hmm.
figure it out as you go. We can do this, just this like it'll happen the way it's going to happen.
Hmm.
And sometimes you have to let go of that like information overload and just focus on what your gut is telling you.
Speaking of that, talk to me about your choice to go sober a couple years ago. Yes. And how I have
Yeah.
recently, like, I guess I'm still under 300 days, but talk to me about that, the choice of that hard, given that you started your career in finance, planning industry events that were booze cruises and luring young, recent college graduates into a world of success and around successful people, how that has changed and evolved.
Yeah, I mean, I think I thought it was hard at the time. And now it's been over 2 years. I look back and I'm like, the hard part was living 40 years or whatever, 38 years of my life being a high performing individual and also drinking. Like that
Hmm.
was hard. Like
Yeah,
I was giving myself it was like a disability, right? Like
truly,
essentially,
truly,
I
you
was like,
were.
I was just, I wasn't helping myself at all. In fact, I was doing something that was harming myself all that time. Um, I, for me, it was another example of that. Well, I'm not just going to help this woman raise money to run a marathon. I'm going to actually do it myself. It was like a badge of honor.
Mm.
And when I decided to stop drinking, my husband had already stopped a year before. He was such a
Mhm.
great example to me of just, he was so happy. He felt so good.
Right,
He looked
right.
so good. It, just really changes so many different aspects of your world. I was like, okay, I'm really ready to do this. And then, you get one day in, you get 2 days, and you get like a month, and I'm like, I just felt so badass. It was just, it stopped being hard for me. I never even think about it anymore. Like, doesn't even cross my mind. But when it does come up in conversation and people are like, oh, that's so great, I feel proud. Like it is like a badge of honor for me. It's just, something that I saw as a challenge. It
Mhm.
turned out to like kind of lose that like challenge aspect of it because my
Mhm.
life just became so much better. It's something I hope, again, you and I talk a lot about the examples that we're setting. And my kids are going to make their own decisions for themselves. I try not
Mhm.
to preach like, you can't do this, you can't do this. That's the fastest way to get someone to
Yeah,
do
to do
something.
something.
We know that. But I hope that they can really see how happy, how free,
Yeah.
how more patient, like lots of things
Mhm.
that just,
Mhm.
when I kind of got rid of that toxic chemicals I was putting into my body, I became a happier person. It doesn't mean that all of life's problems go away, but I can deal with them in a different way than I was dealing with them when I was drinking wine.
I grew up in a house and now in being sober and with someone who is sober as well and feel like there is no upside to it. There is literally
Right.
no upside.
Yep.
And feeling like I've come back to myself and who I am. In some ways, that was one of the major reasons to quit alcohol. Like, why would I want to change who I am? And I go through some hard emotional things, but that's okay. Like that's okay. I need to unearth some things, and alcohol's not going to do it.
And I know that for lots of people, there is that stress of how this changes my social life, going through and doing those hard things. Like it kind of going back to do a hard thing, see that
Mhm.
you're still standing and surviving after it. Once you do it, you start to stack up those wins of doing a hard
Mhm.
thing and then like getting through it. You're like, it becomes easier and easier. So,
Becomes this like free luxury. That's what I always keep saying. It's like it's such a luxury.
yes.
It's a hard thing to choose, and yet it's free. It's a free luxury to be able to do all the things that make Sarah, and Mare. Like John Mayer does this one interview. I'm sure you've seen it. He said, when I chose to go sober, it does lower the level. You realize this is kind of boring, kind of like, all right, it's kind of flat. And then it just slowly starts to rise. Those are the instone markers for me that it gets easier and easier. You can align more and more, get to sort of a plateau, and then you start to rise even above that. Yeah, I think that it turn on a light switch to what you're able to do as a fully functioning human. Like, wow, I've marginalized myself. No, I can do really hard things. And I wake up the next day and my success rate of staying alive is 100%, right? That's what I always say to myself. I mean, the most guttural, hard days of the early diagnoses of Mac and Millie, and just thinking that, like, my life is over. Like, this is my life now as I know it. The trajectory I want to be on is over. And yet I still woke up again and I still
Mm-hmm.
was able to choose joy. It's just a diagnosis that changes life. It reminds me day to day, I'm still here and I'm healthy and I am more myself than I probably would have been had I not had children with a life path altering diagnosis. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today. We know that.
There are so many things I wouldn't have done if
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't gone through that. And I'll give you like the first, it happened so quickly for me too. So so many people reached out when they found out that I was sick and going through what I was going through. And one woman in particular, I didn't know her in college, but through a friend of a friend, she found out that I was going through treatment for Hodgkin's lymphoma, and she happened to be running for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. She was raising money for them to run the Chicago Marathon. And
Mm-hmm.
she reached out to me and she said, I heard about your story. I don't think we were classmates. We just happened to be at school at the same time. Would you mind if I put your name on my shirt and ran in your honor? And I was like, started crying. I was like, first of all, that's
Yeah.
so amazing. This was still like 7 or 8 months like before the marathon were to take place. And I was just finishing my treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's super cool. And absolutely you can. But what if I also ran the marathon too? Like what if I could, and this is like how brain works and how it started working. I was like, what if I could beat cancer and on a marathon like within a year? And the entire time I was running, I was saying to myself, and this is something I say to myself still every day, and I know you feel this too. It's sometimes this sucks, this hurts, but I get to do
I
this.
get
I
to do
get
this.
to do this. And every single step of that marathon, and it took me a very long time, that first one I
Mm-hmm.
ran, and I enjoyed
Mm-hmm.
every single second of it
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
it was so much better than sitting in that chair doing that hard thing. I was like, well, this is hard, but this is nothing compared to that. And having that perspective in my life, I mean, every single day since that day I sat in a chair getting chemo, had that kind of has been my thought process. Like, yeah, it's hard, but I get to do it. I'm choosing to do it.
Yeah, I think No, and yeah, like no one would choose at 22 to get a diagnosis like that. And I always say no one is signing up going, you know what I want? Two kids with non-speaking autism. And then when it's thrust your way, the perspective that it gives you, what then you get to do, makes things that are hard yet positive seem like a, gosh, I mean, yeah, I get to do that now? Holy crap. I mean, no one on their deathbed says, I really shouldn't have taken the time to invest in myself.
Such a an intentional thing in everyday life in doing these hard things. I mean, you and I both have experiences that were thrust upon us that we didn't choose, and some people don't get that, and that's great if you're going through a life where you haven't had those hardships yet and
Yeah.
you're so very blessed. However, that's why I feel like, one thing I'm very intentional about with my kids.
And with extreme prejudice, don't want that glass of wine anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Like that to me, it's like such a turnoff now. I'm like, no, I could
Right.
like that. Yeah, it would just like undermine all of
Yes.
the greatness that's going on. Kevin calls it
Yeah.
like the greatest life hack. He's like, we just kind of sit on the couch and we're very boring now, but like we'll just
Yeah.
be like, he'll just look at me and say, like, isn't it the best life hack that we just don't drink? Like, as much as we don't think about drinking, so we don't want to, we do appreciate
Yes.
often how good it feels because we don't. I will say that is something we talk about a lot. We'll say like,
You have
"Great,
to.
how great is it right
God,
now?
it feels
Like,
so
how great do
good.
you feel right now?" Like, we just feel good. And he's like, "The best life hack was to just," and how also easy is it to subtract something? Like the life hack really wasn't like going out and doing hard. Like I know the act is hard, but it's just that we stopped doing
Yes.
one thing.
Yeah.
And it's been just had such an impact on
Yeah.
everything that we do. And I say we
I
because it has really just
It
been such a
is.
journey of the two of us, like stopping, but it's life hack. It just, I mean, all thematically ties back to the hardest things have the most positive, lasting impact. And, I think about just the things that I do now. Would I have chose to do them if I hadn't stopped drinking 2 years ago? Like I have these ideas and I just run with it.
Yes.
I've started my coaching business. I started my bag company.
Yes.
Like I have all of these things that I do because I have so much energy. I feel really good and so I do them. And I think
Right.
it was a hard choice at one point. Like I chose the hard. I'm not going to drink anymore. I really would like to change my life. And I get to reap the benefits right now. And I think some people, if they could just choose that hard, would make so
Mhm.
many other things in their life so much easier. But it's that seeing it as the hard decision to make of not
Yeah.
drinking, I think is just,
Yeah. I don't have as much fear of failure in general because it's like,
yep,
well, I can just try something else. There's all these things that you never would realize come because of that choice. There's no alternative, right?
I
Like
just I
nothing could make me go back at this point.
Nothing could make me go back. Nothing sounds less attractive to me.
Right.
But it's also because I have really found myself. I think that was like a big piece of it for me. Like I feel like I changed so much
Hmm.
for the better.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I think just having such a supportive partner too, who, Kevin
Yeah.
wasn't drinking, it's something we do together. It's kind of like
Hmm.
our badge of honor. Where when the two of us are together, we're like, we feel good. And it was that like, thank God every day that we made that decision to stop and
You
we're
bring your whole
happy.
self. I always think about that. It's like you bring your whole
Yeah.
self. There's no representative being put into any relationship anymore. No representative.
And I hope that the kids see that you don't need anything other than yourself to be the best version of yourself, that you don't need anything to change you, to help those conversations at those college parties. Like you can have just as much fun, in fact, more fun, and be yourself without it.
One of the coolest thing about autism is that Mac and Millie literally do not care what anyone thinks of them. Like they only know how to be themselves.
Yeah.
Full stop. And that was such an aha moment for me years ago. If I'm choosing to allow them to be the best versions of themselves and guide them, why would I not do the same for myself? That makes that in itself, like no one should trust me then. If I'm doing it for my kids, I'm doing it for myself. I mean, no one should ever listen to me. No one should ever follow me. No one should ever. No, I need to become the best version of who I'm meant to be. Unfortunately, I have societal conditioning. They don't. 10, 20 years down the line, yeah, it'll be hard. And at the same time, it won't be anything more than they actually are. So, with that, do you have any final thoughts at all of choosing the hard thing?
From the moment you told me about Inchstone and that just the phrase and the concept of it just resonated so deeply with me because it's not about, doing things that other people expect that you should do on a certain time, certain timeline or done a certain way. It's like these small moments where you're getting those wins, you're stacking them up and you're feeling so good about yourself. Like personally, I've gone through so many of those. Some things people wouldn't call milestones, probably things that other people wouldn't even celebrate because they were like hard things, right? But for me, they were very deliberate, very intentional. And, as I'm raising two amazing daughters, it's so imperative that we're every single piece of progress we have is recognized because even from daughter to daughter, right? They don't look the same.
I'm so proud of you. And we have seen different versions of Sarah and Meredith, but it's really wonderful to see where we are now, and I'm proud to know you.
I'm proud to know you too. I'm so happy to be on your podcast and just be your friend.